G'day friends, just wanted to do another quick video on what's happening in this current situation, and I want to pose a question, a rhetorical question, because I'm kind of going to give you the answer as far as I'm concerned. And the question is, why do blacks loot? Okay, a big part of what's going on over there in the United States is all the looting, the unabashed looting that's taking place. And we've all seen the clips, or most of us have probably seen the clips of certain agitators and agent provocateurs, police in some cases themselves, getting things started, smashing windows, all that type of thing. Then you throw in the Soros type funds and funded groups such as Antifa and a lot of left-leaning communist-style groups. And it is a fact that blacks are mostly left-leaning. In fact, I believe it's about 95% of black people in America vote Democrat, the ones that do vote. So there's a reason why blacks lean to the left, and it goes back a long way. And, the reason blacks loot is that they feel that they have been hard done by with slavery. Okay, slavery, that's the big thing, that they have never been really justified, or they haven't really had justice for the big event known as slavery, where from the early 1600s or mid 1600s they were brought over on boats, on ships, in very harsh conditions, and more died than people even know. There's probably records somewhere of the exact numbers, but there are records of numbers that died. Some journeys even went so far as to say that 9 out of 10 people that were taken out of their homes in Africa perished on the journey, if not from the interior to the shore, well then on the ships themselves, only to be sold, branded, and sold to slave owners who worked them on the plantations and in various other applications. So, a lot of blacks know the history to a degree. They know that a lot of blacks died in this period of a couple of hundred years or so, when it was more intense, the slave ships. But the genesis of the whole problem goes back a long, long way. And if you really trace back the locus of thought that made people believe that it was okay to grab a bunch of these people and bring them over in the most egregious of conditions, if that's the right word, there is a certain line of thought and a certain pretense that made people believe that that was just okay to do that. And it goes back to the Babylonian Talmud and Jewish sages such as Maimonides, I think that's how you say it, yep, and others, who basically put forward the assertion that the black race, okay, and there's many different tribes and cultures within African, the African peoples, but generalizing, they said that the blacks were sons of Ham, which was a son of Noah, and they kind of they do twist the narrative of what happened back in those days, where that Ham saw his father Noah naked, and Noah wasn't happy with that, and so forth, and they've twisted it to say that Ham was actually black, and that he buggerized his father, which means homosexual relations with his father. There's stories of Ham, not being fully human, put it that way. Okay. And to flow on from there, that the black race is not fully human. Now, we know that these Jewish sages believe that anyone who isn't Jewish isn't fully human either. But they have a special place in their hearts for the black people, and they believe them to be the lowest form of human life. that they're not fully human. They're somewhere in between a monkey and a human being. And we could go off onto the theory of evolution and how that kind of tries to justify that type of thinking and so forth. But it is in the Jewish mind that follows the Talmud, basically Kabbalistic thinking. It's in the Kabbalist's mind that the black man is not fully human. Okay, and the outcome of that is that they get treated a certain way. Okay, now if you fast forward a little bit into the the 16th century, what you had in early America there is you had the a lot of Judaic Freemasonic thinking come into the society, and basically it permeated through society, but it was especially adhered to by the elites of that society. And you only have to take one look at Washington, D.C. later on that happened, but you only have to take one look at Washington, D.C. and all the monuments and the Freemasonic monuments, which Freemasonry has its roots in Kabbalah. Okay, it's Kabbalistic thinking. Okay, so, the elites of early America basically drew their thoughts from the Talmud and Zohar, which is Kabbalah. And what you also had were Jews who owned corporations and vast tracts of land and plantations themselves. And so they thought it'd be okay to build some rum distilleries in I think it was Rhode Island up there, Newport, and probably all around New York on the coast. And they thought it'd be okay to build, a couple of dozen rum distilleries and take that rum over to Africa on their Jewish ships and exchange the rum, who they basically fed to the African tribal leaders and got them hooked on alcohol, on rum, and basically convince them to give up their countrymen as slaves to come to America. Now, I'm not sure what kind of story they told these people, or what they, if they really told them the full story of what was going to happen to these people. For all we know, they could have told them that they were going to, take them to Kingdom Come. But the deal was done where, millions and millions of gallons were produced of rum to go and take to Africa to buy these Africans for the purpose of bringing them back and selling them into slavery. And lots of profit was made on the slave trade, which was predominantly Jewish owned. And in fact, the largest slave owner, or slave trader, Aaron Lopez, was a Jew, and he controlled about 50%, just one man, of the Jewish slave trade, the black African slave trade, I should say. And so there were many, many other Jews who were in this business, and it was basically a monopoly, a Jewish monopoly on the industry. So they went and they took these slaves and put them on the plantations, which were a lot of them Jewish owned by Rothschilds and big cotton industry and so forth. And they brought these slaves to these plantations, and they exploited them. And you get some apologists who want to blame white people for the slave trade, and they pretend that these industrialists didn't really make much of a profit from slavery and the fact that slaves worked on the plantations. But of course they did. That's the whole reason they got slaves, was so they didn't have to pay them. They had to, they looked after them, the slave owners, which a lot of them were white, okay? But the produce of the plantations would be dealt by big banks and was sold into England. A lot of the cotton was sold into England, and there was a massive textiles industry from that, which the Rothschilds, people like this, and banks were profiting from. So that's the end goal, to get that profit on the slave trade, on the free labour. So because of what was in their thinking, deep in their thinking, justified what was written in the Talmud, they thought that this was just okay. There was no sense of conscience, because when you believe a lie and you live a lie, you shut out the Holy Spirit and, the Spirit of truth that says this is not a good thing to do. So this is the genesis of the thought that let this kind of thing happen. Now, of course, you've got these same people who are controlling the media and a lot of the educational curriculum now, and a lot of, and Hollywood movies and printing houses, and a lot of this history has been erased, and all of the blame for slavery, because millions and millions and of millions, and no one knows the exact figure, but many, many millions of Africans died in this. So um, all of the blame has been put on the white man. And even a lot of the blacks, there are some blacks that know the full story, but it's a very minor number. But most blacks put the full blame on this white supremacy fable, where in fact, okay, they've been brainwashed by the education system, by the movies, okay, to think that the people that were really abusing them and making the most money from them were Jewish. And because the Jews own the media, the story doesn't come out to these poor black people who, aren't doing the right thing, but they're a product of, the culture, the Jewish music producer, I think his name was Leo, I can't think of his surname, but he was the man who was behind the gangster rap stuff. So a lot of these black African, especially males, are all a product of this, late 20th century gangster culture and stuff like this. And you find black people, prior to 1950 were very, they were very civilized, if you could use that term. They were getting along, as well as they could with white people, and they were becoming successful and being educated and everything. But you've got this narrative that the white people are the bad guys that did all of the slavery and are fully responsible for the slavery. So when these blacks loot, it's their way of expressing their frustration that they've never been, they've never had justice, and they can't have justice because if people look into it, they'll see who caused the slave trade, and they can't have that. So they're always hanging on a string, because it sort of kind of doesn't make sense, it makes them crazy. And a lot of blacks kind of let it all go, and they forgive and so forth, but they've got this sense of injustice because justice hasn't been done. The true, cause of the slave trade has not been exposed, and it is driving them crazy, even though they don't realise why. So, although they're not doing the right thing with all this looting, and it doesn't help when, Jewish interests exploit the whole thing and send in their agitators and things like that. That doesn't help the situation. But although they're not doing the right thing with the black people there, which is majority of the looters, I do understand a little bit of their psychology on why they're so frustrated with things, and the fact that they haven't really been not rewarded. There's a word I'm looking for. I think they use the word reparations haven't been made. And if the reparations were truly made, it would have to be made by these slave traders and the people that ultimately profited, that owned the corporations that profited from the cotton industry, which was the major industry. It was like the oil business of the day, because it was prior to oil. So you think about all that money that was made on the backs of the slaves. This is what the blacks feel they need to be rewarded for, but they're barking up the wrong tree, because although there were white slave owners, these were just landowners that run the farms, and they did make money too, but the majority of money was made on the trade itself, from Africa to America, on the trade, and by the banks and the corporations that sold, the middlemen that sold the cotton back to Europe. That's where the real money was made. So maybe they should go and knock on some doors that aren't white and ask them for a bit of money back, because I think rather than looting all these stores and upsetting the neighbourhoods, I think that they should come together and really realise and listen to a lot of the smarter black guys that are out there telling this story. Listen to them about the history, and maybe ask some other people what the deal was and why so many of their people were abused. But anyway, that's just my point of view. And until next time, peace.